and the court struck that law down. Stephen Gould, who hates creationists, said no statute exists in any state to bar instruction in creation science. It could be taught before, it can be taught now. The court simply said the state cannot require creation be taught. That was it. They didn't say you couldn't teach it. They just said you can't require it to be taught. That was all. California State School Board says discussions of any scientific fact, hypothesis, or theory related to origins is appropriate to the science curriculum. If you want to get a Bible class in your public school, you're welcome to do that. Elizabeth Ridenour can help you do it. There's her phone number. 150,000 students are taking her curriculum right now. If I want to get Dwayne Gish's book on teaching creation science in a public school, it's on the table out there. What's happened, though, the ACLU, down through the years, has learned all they have to do is threaten to sue a school. Now follow this. The ACLU knows they would lose the lawsuit. Doesn't matter. The threat of a suit causes the average principal to tell the teachers, don't teach creation. Now here the teachers got a problem because the Supreme Court says they can, State Supreme Court says they can, the Circuit Court says they can, even the California State Board of Education says you can, but their boss says you can't. And this is where it's breaking down all across the country, folks. It's gutless principals that won't stand up to the ACLU and say, sue me. In case you don't know, the ACLU is the American Communist Lawyers Union. If a teacher gets up in front of their class and says, kids, you started like a slime and you evolved to a human, any teacher that's teaching evolution needs to understand a couple of things. Number one, that is going to destroy some child's faith in the Bible. Number two, if you destroy a child's faith, you better read what Jesus said about you. Whoso shall offend one of these little ones which believe in me, it were better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck and he were drowned in the depth of the sea. Anybody that teaches evolution is in serious trouble when they stand before God. Don't get mad at me. You take it up with Jesus. The Bible says in the book of James, my brethren, be not many masters, knowing that we shall receive the greater condemnation. It hasn't always been this way in America, though. Back in the 50s, the average textbook only had a little bit of evolution. It wasn't talked about much, 2,000 or 3,000 words, and they dropped the subject. 1957, the Russians beat us in the space race by launching Sputnik, and Americans panicked. How many of you remember the panic in 57 when the Russians beat us in the space race? Everybody said, wow, the Russians are ahead in science. It's probably because they teach evolution. What does teaching evolution have to do with putting up a satellite? By the way, nobody's been able to point out one good thing that's come from the evolution theory. That's not why we have satellites. That's not why we have computers. The theory is useless. Even if it's true, it's useless. But it's certainly not true, okay? 1959, though, was the 100-year anniversary of Darwin's book coming out. And so the atheists and agnostics and skeptics and scoffers got together and they lobbied Congress, and as far as I can figure out, the first time the government got involved in producing textbooks was the late 50s and early 60s. By 1963, the average textbook had 33,000 words about evolution. It dropped off after 63, not because there was less evolution, but because there was less textbook. Overall textbooks got smaller and less words total. The percentage of evolution remained the same. Then in 1963, prayer was taken out of our school system. Anybody remember that with Madeleine Murray O'Hair? 1963 is when we saw a great rise in sexually transmitted diseases for kids 10 to 14 years of age. 1963 is when we began to see a rise in premarital sex for every age group. 1963 is when we saw a great rise in unwed birth rates for girls 10 to 14. Now the birth rates are up 100%. Pregnancies are up over 500. The difference is being aborted. We cover that on video number 4. Right now, 1/3 of all the kids born in the hospitals are to a couple that's not married. The number of unmarried couples living together in adultery has increased 725%. God's word has not changed. Whoremongers and adulterers, God will judge. The Bible said, thou shalt not commit adultery. It's one of the 10 commandments, not the 10 suggestions. And Jesus said, if you even look in lust, you've committed adultery already in your heart. By the way, ladies, that's why you should be careful how you dress. My daddy always said, if you're not in business, don't advertise. You figure it out, okay? Divorce rates, yeah, there we go. Divorce rates have increased radically since 1963. Violent crimes have gone up nearly 1,000%. I'm not that old, but I remember the days when you did not have to lock your house. Anybody else remember those days? And you left the keys in the ignition all the time because you might lose them if you took them out. And you go to the average high school, and half the pickup trucks in the parking lot had a loaded rifle hanging in the back window, and the truck wasn't even locked. And nobody got shot back in school in those days, did they? I bet you didn't hear about what happened at Columbine. The real story is those two boys did that shooting on Adolf Hitler's birthday on purpose. It was all planned. They were strong followers of Hitler, who was quite a racist, by the way. They shot Isaiah Shoals just because he was black. They shot Cassie just because she believed in God. Eric's t-shirt, when they found his dead body, said natural selection. They were both very strong believers in evolution. And right after the shooting, Rosie O'Donnell gets on her program and says, see, we need more gun control. Rosie, they broke 18 gun laws going into that school. You think 2 more gun laws would have helped? See, Rosie can't figure it out. Blaming guns for Columbine is like blaming spoons for Rosie O'Donnell being fat. It's not the spoon's fault, Rosie, okay? SAT scores have dropped off radically since 1963. 95, they had to dumb down the test. They made the test easier to make the scores higher so the kids would look like they're doing just as well. Teen suicide rate's gone crazy since 1963. Hey, what's there to live for? Look, if I told you if you kiss a frog, it'll turn to a prince. You say, no, frogs don't turn to princes. How many of you ladies got your husband by kissing a frog? Come on, let me see. Only 2, okay. See, it doesn't happen very often anymore, but in the textbooks it happens all the time. You see, boys and girls, we started like an amoeba, and we slowly evolved to a frog. That's Grandpa. And then very slowly became a prince. They're teaching the same fairy tale, frog turns to prince. But instead of a kiss, oh no. Now they have a new special super duper high-powered magic ingredient called billions and billions of years. How many have ever heard that expression before? Billions of years ago. It's in the textbooks, that's for sure. It's on Carl Sagan's show, Cosmos. Billions of years ago. It's in the magazines. It's in National Geographic, billions and billions of years ago. They teach it like it's a fact, you know, and don't you dare question this. Here's a 4th grade textbook. It says millions of years ago. Now, kids, listen. If you're in class and somebody says, millions of years ago, raise your hand. Say, excuse me, were you there? They'll say, no, of course I wasn't there. And you could say, well, now, teacher, do you know the earth is millions of years old? I mean, is this really part of science? See, science is things we can observe and test and demonstrate in the laboratory and study. I mean, you cannot possibly know the earth is millions of years old. You can believe that if you want, but that's not something you can know. They might say, well, everybody believes that. Well, no, they don't. Most Americans think the earth is less than 10,000 years old and God made it. Only 4% are atheistic. I think that 4% ought to start themselves a private school and teach evolution to anybody that wants to pay and come learn it. They've got no business making us pay for their religion to be taught. But that's what's happening, folks. Now, it is true that slightly more than half of the scientists, 55%, believe in evolution. Those are the ones that have not been to my seminar yet. I'm working on them, okay? But even if a bunch of scientists believe something, that doesn't make it true. There was a time when the scientists taught the planets go around the earth. There was a time when the scientists taught big rocks fall faster than little rocks. That was taught for 2,000 years, and it's not true. They used to teach, you know, if you're sick, you have bad blood. Take out your blood, you'll get better. That's how George Washington died, folks. And while they had special places all over the country to get your blood taken out. You say, I don't feel very good. Take some blood out, please. Out in front of the place, you would see a white pole with a red stripe around it. You ever seen those before? The barber? That's the bloodletter. Clear up until 1860, they were doing that. And right beside George was a Bible.